The Starfleet uniform changes seemingly every few years. Is there somebody that designs the uniforms? Is there like a poncho I can wear?
Welcome to Animate This, where we discuss all the burning and not so burning pop culture fan theories, then bring them to life through the magic of 2D animation. Today, in celebration of Star Trek Lower Decks exclusively on CBS All Access, we got to thinking about the less glamorous jobs in Starfleet, the unsung jobs where you don't get your own special chair on the bridge. What were the Lower Decks doing during Star Trek's biggest moments? And joining me on the bridge via view screen, I've got two bona fide Star Trek experts, writer and humorist Dave Schilling, and IGN's executive editor of movies, Jim Vejvoda. Guys, how's it going?
It's going great. Just before we get started, I want to say that people should know the Lower Decks concept is actually taken from an episode of The Next Generation, the 167th episode of Next Generation, called, incidentally, Lower Decks. That episode is unique because it focuses on those Lower Decks characters, those blue-collar workers that make the Enterprise tick.
I knew that too.
This is going to work out great then. So let's start with you, Dave. What's a tentpole moment in Star Trek history that left you thinking, what about the Lower Decks?
Well, when you think about the Lower Decks and janitorial work on the Enterprise, you have to think about the trouble with Tribbles. That episode, of course, focuses on an infestation on board the original series Enterprise by those little furry creatures called Tribbles. They're everywhere. They're in all kinds of corridors. They're in weird crevices and things in the Enterprise. Someone's got to deal with that. Jim, what would you do if you were a Lower Decks crewman on the Enterprise and you've got a Tribble infestation?
Being asked to get rid of all these little furry, cute little creatures, not everybody might be up for just beaming them onto a Klingon ship as a gag, because I think they know what's going to happen to them once they're on that ship.
What if you're the person, you go into the toilet and you open up your toilet and then these furry creatures come popping out of your toilet? Who do you call to fix that? Who is the person who is the Tribble wrangler during this issue? Who is the guy who's just pushing with a push broom Tribbles into a cage or like a bucket?
You don't think that they're up there on the bridge gearing up for warp, and captain's looking around at all the different officers. Are we ready? Are we ready? Everybody's like, yep, we're good. And then the last person he checks is the Tribble wrangler.
Where's my Tribble guy? Get me the Tribble guy. Imagine somebody just looking at every room. Is there a Tribble in here? Excuse me, have you seen any Tribbles?
All right, Jim, what about you? What's a tentpole moment in the history of Star Trek that you want to talk about?
All right, so let's talk Next Generation. Let's talk Cupid. Now, this is the episode where Picard is supposed to be doing an archaeological conference when Q shows up, and before you know it, they're playing Robin Hood on this planet. But I'm wondering, while they're off playing Robin Hood, who's running the ship? I would like to know. Gentlemen, thoughts?
Well, first of all, you have to assume that someone who has very little experience with command is now captain of the Enterprise, while everybody else is on the planet wearing silly costumes. So that means that there's some guy, probably named Steve or Chris or Ted or something.
Most definitely it's Steve.
It's a Steve. There's a Steve on the Enterprise.
A real Steve energy in the captain's chair.
He's got a little Napoleon hat and a little, one of those batons that you use, probably in a uniform that doesn't totally fit, thinking, I swear, if there is a Romulan ship that decloaks right now, my head is going to explode because now I'm responsible for running this ship.
And at some point, I feel like a whole line of Lower Decks crew starts to form behind the captain's chair, and they all just take 5-minute shifts as captain.
All of a sudden, that chair is up for grabs. Does it turn into Lord of the Flies on the Enterprise at this point? Because there's no rhyme or reason. We don't know.
I think there's probably a rock, paper, scissors competition to decide who has to be the acting captain during a crisis.
In a society as evolved as Star Trek seems to be, rock, paper, scissors is probably the way it happened.
All right, I actually want to back up and go original series. I want to talk about the episode Court Martial. This episode is noteworthy for, at least for me, for introducing the idea of the duty roster. There's a list on the Enterprise where you can get called up for any perilous duty regardless of what your job on the ship is. Maybe you've never even been to space before. It is literally Day one, you're fresh out of the academy. You're like, this is gonna go great.
And all of a sudden, you're out there in a pod investigating an ion storm?
I'm never doing it. I'm bribing every single one of my fellow crewmates. I am going to give people Saurian brandy. I'm going to offer to clean their bunks. Ensign Dave has a plan to escape the ion pod.
There's probably a pretty excellent smuggling ring going on that Ensign Davis is now in charge of. Just like I'm just picturing like whatever the Starship Enterprise version of a drug lord would be.
I hear you guys like Romulan ale. Well, let me tell you something. I got 7 bottles of Romulan ale in my closet. You just come and check it out.
Let's talk about the episode Genesis. Now, this one is interesting because it affects the entire crew in very profound ways. Everybody starts turning into creatures, like de-evolving into other beings. For example, Worf becomes some sort of proto-Klingon. Riker turns into like a Riker beast. What do you guys think? What do you think actually happened to the lower decks people when they got turned?
Yeah, is this some sort of, you devolve into the most basic version of yourself, so it's like the ultimate sort of litmus test of self-confidence?
I like the idea of it literally being the most basic version of yourself, and a crew woman named Karen turns into just herself, but with a really bad haircut and a pumpkin spice latte.
And also, after all of this clears up and everybody goes back to normal, did they have a memory of what happened?
Yes, hello? Is this Ensign Lynch's parents? Yes. Poor Ensign Lynch, passed away. Did she die in combat? Nobly? Well, no, she turned into a cockroach, and then, Mr. Davis stepped on her.
Well, there you go. Who do you think has the most undervalued job in Starfleet? Let us know why in the comments, and make sure to check out Star Trek Lower Decks exclusively on CBS All Access.